My name is Shelly Silver. I'm the director of The Lamps, which is a brief scene from the amazing life of the Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven.
Welcome to the festival, to Berlin.
Oh,
you're an old Berliner, actually.
I am.
You've been here quite a lot. And the first time in the early 90s.
Yes, I came here first in 91.
Okay, so you really experienced this period after reunification and like this special kind of energy, which is fading now. A lot of people are very afraid that Berlin is losing its, status of this free city, with this free spirit, and you were probably lucky to have experienced that in the early 90s.
Yeah, at the moment it was really tumultuous, and I made a film about it, Former East, Former West, which was really about how do you define German after the reunification, and I went to almost every neighborhood in Berlin to do interviews, and it was an incredible time.
And did you interview Berliners, or was it people that had moved there, or just
anybody
all sorts of
who
people?
would talk to us. Anybody who would talk to us, yeah.
Okay. Well, this time you came with a different film.
Very different film.
Shorter, and it is introducing us to a very special personality living in a time where these times actually did not allow for such an open and free spirit.
Right.
Who is this person?
So the Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven was this amazing poet, sculptor, cross-dresser, public provocateur, and personality that was so large and so breaking the boundaries that, in fact, she suffered quite a bit for it.
What fascinates you with her? What is attracting you to this personality, persona, or personas she was like?
Well, what attracts me is that she was just so amazing and so strong and so absolutely fearless, and then finally imploded from it. But also, there's not that much known about her. I mean, there's some artwork left, there's poetry, there's an unpublished memoir, but very little is known, so that in fact she's like a perfect person to project one's own fantasies onto. And she's also a very contemporary figure, because we're only now catching up with her.
So you focus on a specific, special journey she made down to the south of Italy, where she comes across interesting sex objects from Pompeii. Actually.
Exactly.
And what is the relationship between the past and the present in your film, and what is interesting about those objects and this special place she went to?
Well, you could see it in that different moments of history allow for a more broad definition of gender and sexuality. And so definitely the objects in Il Gabinetto Segreto, the secret cabinet, contain a lot of those objects. And then when she went, which was the late 1800s, 19th century, women were not allowed in, but she broke in and she fondled all of these amazing objects. And then now, as her life is being rediscovered, I went back to this moment of time. And in fact, there's a certain sculpture in it that figures quite centrally that I won't talk about, but also references a certain blurring of boundaries.
Do you think she would have had a much easier life if she had lived today or later?
Speaking for myself, because again, she's a figure to project onto, I think that she definitely would have. If I look at my mother and my time, and then I project back a few centuries, a century earlier, absolutely.
Where's your mother from?
I grew up in Brooklyn,
Okay.
And my mother grew up in Brooklyn, and my grandparents were immigrants from Eastern Europe.
Okay. And I would like you to elaborate more on your personal relationship to this figure. What is it? What are the personal connection, or like the points that maybe you have in common, or that you project in the end?
Well, like I'll put it this way, like every person who at the moment identifies themselves as a woman, you're constantly hitting up against these boundaries, or hitting up against these places where you're located. And I would say that that's more expansive. That's anybody, but especially under patriarchy, certain people feel it more. So as much as she probably had a much harder time, I feel constantly pushing up against these definitions and even, what it is to be a person right now.
Can you talk about right now? Because it's such a, there are moments where you can say, there's certain parts of like patriarchy are in the process of being defeated, that there has been some liberation. But then also talking about the US at this very moment, it is so like, looking at it from Europe, it is so scary, almost to see people like Trump or whatever who like embody this like horrible like patriarchal figure, and he becomes so popular. So, and there seems to be this backlash maybe coming. I don't know if it's really there yet or not, but how do you experience life in the US at the moment too?
You use the word backlash.
Yes.
So you use the word backlash, and I think that it's a crucial word because as much as we're moving forward in terms of rights, there's also a huge backlash against it. If you look at, even in the United States, but certainly around the world, the violence towards women is enormous. Violence towards people who look different for whatever reason is enormous, and this happens also in New York. So I do think it's an exciting moment in certain ways, and also for certain classes of people, certain people living in certain places, but also there's a huge backlash against anybody who looks or identifies as different, female, queer, you name it. And I worry about that also because I worry about the political situation and how to push through all people's rights. And certainly the Baroness was pushing physically, verbally, and otherwise for the right to speak in different ways and the right to live in different ways and look different.
What do you think is she teaching us, or can she teach us for this very moment we live in right now? Like what specific behavior or actions or just mindset, or what is it that she could help us with? Well, as like the guiding, I don't know, like spirit, like in that.
Well, where she helps us is this example of someone who pushed, this example of someone who created. I mean, of course, until very recently, nobody knew that she was actually the creator of what became Marcel Duchamp's fountain. Marcel Duchamp spoke about her, the Baroness is the future. And so I think that for me, I see her as a kind of role model, a mentor, a possibility, a kind of excitement that I could look back to and then project myself forward into, although, I'm not at all dressed as she does or as fabulous as she is, still her spirit shows also that through time that somehow she survived enough that now we can rediscover her.
What is like your role as an artist in these times too? How do you define your role?
I mean, I would say that in the best sense, I try to be a mentor. I'm an artist. I'm also an educator. I teach at Columbia University. I'm the first chair of my program, the visual arts program, who's a woman. So in many ways, like in the outside world, I try to
project too, like positive things.
Exactly. Be someone that I never had when I was growing up. Or, my mother worked, and my mother was a great mentor figure for me. But certainly at university, there were very few figures that I could look to. But then in terms of my own work, I would say that I don't like the world as it is. And I don't decide I'm going to make a work to make the world better. I make a work that I'm excited about, passionate about, and because I find it difficult to live in the world right now, then it usually pushes into the realm of pushing against certain norms, whether they be genre norms or gender norms or narrative norms.
But as a professor, how do you experience the work or the general behavior of young, maybe like female identified is maybe the right word, or like women or female-bodied people in university contexts, in emerging artist contexts? Like, how do they have enough self-confidence? Are they well equipped, for the future? What is your experience?
I mean, some are more than others. It's still a very patriarchal system, the academy. We're doing all we can to change that. But what's worse is when they get out, the art world is very sexist, just like the film world is very sexist. So this is so that in a way you have to be that much more out there, that much stronger. And I mean, I have fought not to do things in a mainstream way, which of course disadvantages me also. But nobody, I don't want anybody to tell me how to speak. So, but I think on the other hand that the new generation is making huge leaps forward that I never did. For example, we were just looking at the applicants for next year, and the amount of people that were not he or she, but were they, was enormous. And this was really the first year that we noted that, and so this makes me wildly optimistic.
That's great. And I think the US teaches us so much too that we can't deny this intersectional look at stuff, that there's always this interference of race, class, and gender. And
Yeah.
I feel still that in the US there's amazing programs and people that push for it. So I'm optimistic too.
Yeah.
I try to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for coming and showing your film.
My name is Shelly Silver. I'm the director of The Lamps, which is a brief scene from The Amazing Life, and I made a film about it, Former East, Former West, which was really about how do you define German after the reunification. And I went to almost every neighborhood in Berlin to do interviews, and it was an incredible time.
And did you interview Berliners, or was it period after reunification and like this special kind of energy, which is fading now? A lot of people are very afraid that Berlin is losing its status of this free city, with this free spirit, and you were probably lucky to have experienced that in the early 90s.
Yeah, at the moment it was really tumultuous.
People that had moved there, or just
anybody
all sorts of people,
who would talk
that's
to
what
us.
made up the
Anybody
city,
who would talk to us, yeah.
Okay. Well, this time you came with a different film.
Very different film.
Shorter. And it is introducing us to a very special personality living in a time where these times
Of the Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven.
Welcome to the festival, to Berlin.
Oh,
You're an old Berliner, actually.
I am.
You've been here quite a lot. And
Yeah.
the first time in the early 90s.
Yes, I
So
came
you-
here first in '91.
Okay, so you really experienced this